On today's World Insight, with China and the U.S. keen on improving relations, both are counting on renewable energy to reach climate targets. How feasible are joint green projects? Direct answers from Neil Bush, the founder and chair of the George H.W. Bush Foundation for U.S. China Relations.
Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian. After the China-U.S. summit in San Francisco, I've been having a series of conversations with people in the know from both sides. Today, let's meet Neil Bush, the founder and chair of George H.W. Bush Foundation for U.S. China Relations. He hailed the green cooperation between China and the United States as a new model for cooperation between the two sides. Our conversation started from there. COP28 is taking place. Are you expecting much to be achieved there as an observer, of course?
There's tons of momentum for facing the reality that we need to capture carbon. We need to keep carbon emissions from influencing, global warming. And I think COP28 is going to continue to be, an impetus for that kind of change. Sadly, in the political system in the United States kind of rewards some who are climate change deniers and think it's all natural and there's nothing we can do about it. It's not human cause. It was going to happen anyway. It's kind of their philosophy. Right. But so the United States, though, under the Biden administration has been putting policy in place to try to, spur the development of green energy, carbon capture, electric vehicles and that kind of thing. We're a little late, I think, to the game, but I think there's finally some positive momentum, and COP28 will help reinforce that.
We saw the Sunnyland agreement between China and the United States right before the San Francisco summit between the two presidents. Do you see that likely to be further implemented and reconfirmed at COP28?
Yeah.
What about implementation?
I'm really not sure what the role of COP28 is in that kind of consideration. I'm not an expert in the field from a policy perspective, but it can't help. It can't help, but to move things forward. It makes me more optimistic. I just love the fact that American and Chinese leaders are getting together and that they put issues on the table and have discussions in a respectful way. And I'm confident that
long overdue, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, there's been the walls have gone up and the mistrust has been building up. And so now that COVID is over, we're able to get back together again. And my father was a big believer in using personal relationships for diplomatic purposes. And the George H.W. Bush Foundation for U.S. China Relations is inspired by his vision. And so we bring people together from the Chinese side, the American side. We've had party-to-party dialogue. We're a Communist Party, Republicans and Democrat, former leaders in a track 2 setting come together. We have youth from China and the United States come together. We need more exchange, more dialogue. When you're present with other people, when you're in their presence, it's hard to say bad things about them, you know what I mean?
As simple as that, isn't it?
It's very simple, but if you're on a debate stage, right now there are many Republicans trying to become the competitor to Donald Trump for the nomination. All of them are like talking smack about China because that's kind of low-hanging fruit politically for them. But if they came to China, they would see that what they're saying isn't even true, or is the fears they're raising among our population are based on false false facts.
Right. I want to ask you about the people-to-people exchange because that's exactly what your foundation has been doing so many years.
Right.
Is it as easy as earlier to persuade people to be on that kind of platform and do something concrete?
There are some people who are not active in politics, who were active in politics, who do engage, former trade officials, former ambassadors and that kind of thing in cross-border dialogue or bilateral dialogue. But it's hard to get people that are actively engaged in the political system right now. I was so happy to see Governor Newsom. I'm not a Democrat, but I was so happy to see a governor of a big state in the United States bring a delegation to China and to Guangdong you know, to promote his state and to be, you know, be present here. So, but that's rare. It's kind of, it's a little bit like pulling teeth right now to get people to join forums, you know, regarding U.S. and China. And it's
what would you do in order to put that teeth?
I think we're going to have to give it time, honestly. You know, Henry Kissinger just passed away. He was and my father, we would have celebrated his 99th birthday last week. So interestingly, the two of the giants of U.S. China relations are now off the scene entirely. And I just have a hard time knowing what, you know, statesman is waiting in the wings to take on building trust and a closer relationship with China. It's vital. The Chinese national interests and the U.S. national interests are linked. Your success is integral to our success. Our success is integral to your success. And we have the ability to blow everything up if we want to, not just in a, you know,
many times.
In a war, that's true, but also economically, if this whole concept of decoupling, and Republicans talk about it like it's practical. It's not even practical, but the whole concept of decoupling is basically like a nuclear, it's the version in an economic sense of a nuclear war. You know, it would destroy China, it would destroy the United States, and nobody wants that at the end of the day. But anyway, so right now we have a lot of dangerous political rhetoric, and hopefully those people won't, you know, if they ever get to be in power, they won't act on their rhetoric.
But what does it take? You think it takes statesmen?
Yeah. I think
what kind of statesmen now are in urgent need?
Yeah, I mean, I really believe, so right now the approval rating in the minds of American people towards China is way down. You know, China's been beaten up over and over. Donald Trump started this rhetoric, you know, belittling China and turning China into an enemy, blah, blah, blah. And others now have followed suit. It's become a political, you know, kind of low-hanging fruit politically. A single leader, a real president, could step up and start talking about how over the many years of our bilateral trade relationship, the United States has benefited tremendously from it. The Chinese have. Hundreds of millions of people have been lifted out of poverty, in large part due to our bilateral trade, but not just ours, globally. And we should take great pride in the success of the Chinese economy. But so, yeah, I just think, you know, we got to get back on track in terms of recognizing that this is a win-win. There's a win-win potential that needs to be realized.
How can we understand the latest meeting between the two presidents in San Francisco?
Yeah, it's very interesting to me because I feel like there are two currents running. They're going in opposite directions. You know, the recent meetings of the two presidents, which was preceded by meetings at very high levels of different government ministerial level type people coming, Americans coming here, Chinese going to the United States. All of that has been, you know, a current towards a positive development, a warming of relations, and more respect and in potentially future collaboration. The other stream is the political process in the U.S. We have an election coming up, and as I've already discussed, I'm kind of obsessed with this sad fact that in a political context, if you were to say something favorable about engaging with China, you get clobbered. You wouldn't get past the first base. So anyway, there are two different tides going forward. President Xi, President Biden meeting was very good. They met in Bali. Nothing really came out of that. There was some big talk and promises. Hopefully there's going to be more momentum for, moving this relationship forward in a productive way. I'm actually pleased that Biden, I'm disappointed he hasn't reduced or removed tariffs on most of the products that are being shipped from China to the U.S. There may be some that he has justification for keeping on, but I'm pleased that he's at least initiated this dialogue with his cabinet and with ministers here. So there's some good positive developments.
But every step of the way needs great implementation. Yeah. In order to win trust from both sides?
I mean, if you have people-to-people exchanges, that's great. More students coming from China to the U.S. and vice versa, coming here. Having government-to-government type meetings, but business-to-business. Businesses that already have deep connections in China should be more vocal about the win-win environment that they've invested in here, and that they're taking advantage of the big China market, or they're getting advantages from making their products in China and having them shipped back to the U.S. or around the world. So yeah, there's a lot of exchange needs to take place. I do think, by the way, Governor Newsom's kind of breaking the wall down and coming as a state leader. I think it's more likely that state leaders or city mayors, will have better opportunity to come to China to promote their local community, as opposed to a federal effort at the, in the U.S. So, I think that it's going to take step by step. Things are going to get more and more connected.
What have you found out when it comes to business, when you were talking to Chinese entrepreneurs?
Great question. So I guess one of my bigger observations is that many companies I've met clothing manufacturer, a tire manufacturing company, an EV, an electric vehicle car manufacturing company. I've met companies that are involved in the renewable energy space. And many of these companies are trying to find ways to land outside of China, to globalize or to internationalize. And they're doing so in part because the tariffs make it impossible to sell their products into the U.S. So if they set up, in one group I'm very familiar with, has operations in Cambodia, and they can ship their tires from Cambodia into the U.S. And they do ship, and they have a manufacturer. Third party. So they're kind of offshoring their production. China's advantage used to be cheap labor, but now you go into Chinese factories, the automation that you see, the implementation of technology to make stuff, their manufacturing skills, their efficiency in making stuff has gone to really high levels. And so their competitive advantage isn't cheap labor so much as it is, the technology to make things efficiently. And they've got the supply chain issues and the shipping issues and all those kinds of things totally figured out. So China continues to remain a really prime, kind of manufacturer of choice for much of the world. Anyway, so those are observations. I'm not sure I can answer the question about what Chinese business people think about the Chinese economy. I was in a session at CIC where Ambassador Max Baucus led a delegation, and one of the presenters there was talking about how, the American media and American political elite, if you will, have for many years talked about how China's economy was going to go into the tank. And I've witnessed this myself. You see in the newspapers, today the most current thing is the real estate, issues. It's going to create this giant mess for China. China's economy is going to go into the tank. It's going to sink, and everybody's going to be in a depression or something here. There are different iterations of that skepticism or that prognostication of doom that have taken place over the past 30 years. And it's never, so the Chinese system has the ability to, apparently, to power through, every 5-year plan after a 5-year plan, the KPIs that are put in place for the leaders of these various jurisdictions, they meet the goals. And so the fact that the Chinese economy has grown at 5% this year, to me, is a pretty positive sign that the Chinese economy is not going into the tank. And I don't get the sense that Chinese business people are doom and gloom about the economy. You would have a better sense than I would of that.
So you believe the presidencies would be able to justify this current state of the Chinese economy?
The what?
The presidencies of assessment of Chinese economy have not been...
Never been good, never been accurate.
And therefore, this time will be very similar.
Yeah, I'm guessing that's true. That's not a very scientific analysis, okay? I mean, there are people that are economists that could sit in this chair and give you a much better answer on that. I would bet, however, that many of the economists, who are predicting China's doom and gloom are probably going to be wrong. So my impression is the Chinese haven't used all the tools in their toolkit to try to address the economic challenges.
What are left?
I have no idea. You tell me. There's got to be some economic stimulus. In America, we just spend more money. You know, we've got this giant debt. Yeah. And Republicans are just as guilty as Democrats. We have a $33 trillion debt. With inflation, the interest on that debt now represents 16% of our annual GDP, which is a huge number. The Chinese, I think, have room to borrow and build if they want. I think the Chinese are more prudent than the United States has been. But I have a feeling there are economic stimulus available in the Chinese, you know, economic toolkit.
The world is changing fast, taking all our lives with it. But we can change it too, by seeking answers to problems through discussions and debates. On World Insight, I ask direct questions to real people in the know, seek genuine answers, but respect diverse perspectives. Our live global debates tackle the most critical issues head-on. World Insight with Tian go beyond the headlines. In the congratulation letters given by Chinese President Xi Jinping, there's a sentence specifically talking about China taking advantage of high level of opening up policy to encourage high quality development.
If you just focus on renewables, for example, the Chinese have put, as you know, very ambitious goals, 2030, 2060 goals out there. And the amazing thing about the Chinese system is when the goals are set from the top, they're followed all the way through the system. And so when I go visit party secretaries of Wuhu, for example, or in Anhui province, you know, one of the things they talk about is the economic growth in their thing. We're going to grow at 5% or whatever. But they're also talking about the things they're doing to accommodate the green initiatives that are required. And so they're talking about the wind and the manufacturers. Anyway, so you have a government policy and a government system that is pushing change. As a result of these ambitious plans being pushed from the top down, China has become a huge implementer of renewables, of wind, sun, storage. I went to Inner Mongolia as one of my 5 trips this year, and drove, you know, into the countryside and saw one windmill after another, and it was amazing. And to think that in the Gobi Desert, where there's very little population, it's like the Saudi Arabian gold, you know, or oil, you know, field, or going to a gold mine. It's like amazing. It's an amazing gift that God gave China. That power is being transmitted through high-powered transmission lines to Beijing. So, I mean, it's very clear to me that China has become the largest manufacturer of solar panels, of wind turbines and windmills, of batteries. They're the largest exporter of those products to the world, and they can internationalize and localize their production capability in other parts of the world, which they're I think going to try to do. But you know, I have confidence in China in the renewable space because they're dominant in it. By the way, I'm working with a company in Nanjing that has a carbon capture technology that uses an ammonia-based solution. They're the only ones in the world to do it. They've got a commercial plant being built in Inner Mongolia. There's a huge demand for power plants that are spewing out in cement manufacturing and other operations, spewing out carbon for this kind of technology. So technology isn't just being developed outside of China and coming in, but it's also being developed more and more, like the solar, the wind, the pan, and all that, including carbon capture and hydrogen and all these things that'll be useful and exported to the world.
So Neil, I see you are everywhere in China.
Yeah, I have been.
No wonder it's 5 times to 8 times every year.
The question Americans have and American businesses have, and I hear people raise from time to time, is when they say open up, what does China really mean? I mean, are they really opening up? The regulatory process, is the regulatory system going to be fair when I come into China and make an investment in China? You know, is there really a level playing field? You know, and there are thousands and thousands of companies that are already here. So the answer obviously is that even before this high-level opening up, there's already been enough of an opening up that companies feel comfortable doing business here, and they make profits here, and they participate in the market here. But I think there's skepticism, and maybe it's part of the whole geopolitical, concern about the rising power of China. It's part of the mentality.
That's exactly the question I want to follow up. But what is the priority for U.S. global companies? Is it about domestic politics, scoring this, making the right score in domestic politics? Standing in teams?
Interestingly,
making the right checks? In other words, whether China is doing enough, quote unquote, does it matter at all? And what is doing enough?
Yeah, no, I think it does matter that China does as much as it can to provide incentives and a level playing field and protections for foreign investment into China. I think that's really critical. Without it, there'd be no discussion. But you're right. I think the geopolitical, challenges are creating uncertainty for foreign investment into China. American companies that are here, some have shrunk their operations and have moved overseas outside of China, but some are growing here. It just depends on what the business is and how risky the sector is that they're in. You know what I mean? If you're in semiconductors, you probably want to think about moving some of your operations offshore. But if you're in something, like medical devices or something like that, you probably wouldn't have such a big concern. So I think it depends on the sector as well. One of the things that's been interesting for me to observe is this question of intellectual property, because that's a lot of companies, have to think about whether their intellectual property will be protected in China. And I've heard there have been, kind of rules and regulations put in place that are safeguarding overseas intellectual property. Having said that, the U.S. has been putting lots of effort into trying to find theft of intellectual property, and there have been very few cases prosecuted, and some of the cases that have been brought to the court system have been thrown out for being, so there's kind of a McCarthyistic witch hunt type mentality, which has influenced businesses thinking about coming into China.
The mentality of business.
Yeah, it's just, they think there must be some problem with the intellectual, with their being able to protect their assets, and yet there's been no real massive discovery of intellectual property theft, as far as I know.
The other thing is about tech.
Yeah.
The decoupling is happening in that area the most.
Yeah.
So, Neil, your thoughts?
It's a great question. So I met with leaders of Huawei in the past.
Who's based in Guangdong.
But I met them in, are they? Okay, I didn't know that. I met them I met some people in Washington.
Else,
yeah, and they were talking about the decoupling in the context that for 6G or whatever the next level of communications, network is going to be, that the Chinese are going to be developing their own, that the United States has not been cooperative in developing a standard for that next level of speed of connectivity, and so the chips that are made for China and the chips that are made for the U.S. it's stupid. It's really, the communications, facilitates, closeness and understanding. It also can drive people apart as well. But if you build walls to the technology that you have access to, that seems to me to be going the wrong direction.
It's a dramatically changing world. We have to all find our own core, our own compass. I really wonder, how do you, amid all these bigger environment, small, bigger environment and your own projects of work and life, and try to find the balance of your own?
Yes. Well,
anything to suggest?
Yeah, I've become obsessed recently with this whole topic of longevity, of living a longer, healthy life. And there's a book called Outlive by a guy named Peter Attia. And if you read that book, I think you'll become convinced.
Peter will be very happy since you're doing free promotion for him.
He's sold over 1 million. He doesn't need my help. He's a very popular author. But you'll become convinced that you can avoid getting, you can have a higher probability of avoiding dying from cancer at a young age or dying from a heart disease at a young age. You know, if you practice good health practices, including keeping your body strong, because when you get to be 60, 70, 80 years old, things deteriorate. Your body, your heart strength, you have to keep your heart strong. So exercise is number one. Number two is diet. And it's not, just don't eat too much. You know, he doesn't prescribe what diet's good for you or for me. Just don't overeat.
Common sense, once again.
Common sense. Number three is sleep. You got to get a good quality sleep every night. And number four, which is one of the things that Henry Kissinger had, and one of the things I feel like I have, and you probably have as well, is you need to be connected and engaged and use your brain and be like in a loving environment, or to live a life of purpose. You know, to feel like you're helping others and living a life of purpose gives you strength, and you know, it allows you to, is part of the 4 legs of the stool of living longer and healthy life.
That sounds like a very healthy panda to me.
Yeah. I just feel like everyone can take control of their own health.
Yeah.
And I'm 68 years old, and I want to live to be 100 years old, and I want to play with my great grandkids and watch grandkids grow up and do wonderful things. And so, yeah, I'm kind of obsessed with it.
By then, the world will be better?
Yeah, it's got to be.
Got to be.
It's got to be better. It's got to be better. I mean, so I'm the chairman of Points of Light, which is an organization my father started, and we inspire, equip, and mobilize more people to serve others. And there are so many stories that we see in that I see in that capacity as chairman of young people who are doing amazing things in their community.
Right.
So I'm encouraged that young people are going to figure it out and make this world a better place after all the adults go away.
They are the hope, but we need to lay the foundation.
Of course. I'm not going to give up.
Neil, what a pleasure to see you once again. Thank you so
very
much.
That's my latest conversation with Neil Bush, the founder and chair of the George H.W. Bush Foundation for U.S. China Relations. With that, we're coming to the end of today's program. On behalf of the team, thanks for watching. I'm Tian Wei. Bye for now.